Psalm 26, verse 14. Be a man. Expect the Lord, do manfully, and let thy heart take courage, and wait thou for the Lord. Psalm 26, verse 14, do reins. It is perhaps not as common an expression in the modern world, but English has the excellent idiom of testing one's mettle, mettle, which the pedantic might gleefully pounce upon when those less pedantic say or write it as testing one's mettle, metal. However, in this case, it is the pedantic who are actually in the wrong, as both words are simply spelling variants for the same word. Metal or metal are both ways to describe things like copper or steel. There is also a wonderful idiomatic convergence, since one's temperament is often proved in the process of testing one's mettle, and tempering is part of the process of forging metals for things like swords or other instruments or tools. A well-tempered sword will have the requisite strength that has been given to it by the very means of forging it in the fire. This testing of the metal involves burning off any impurities and strengthening it through intense and fiery processes. Such testings and purifications have been the subject of Psalm 26, from the opening passages where his enemies desire to devour him and surround him like armies in camp, to having been cut off from his family and oppressed by unjust witnesses and calumnies and lies. In all these persecutions and trials, he has kept the Lord always in his sight, see Psalm 15 verse 8, as his light and salvation, and has desired only for the house of the Lord, to dwell therein forever. But in this vale of tears we are on pilgrimage, and the end of our longing is not to be found in this life. Life is a warfare, as the scriptures say, and the good things of the Lord are to be found in the land of the living, in the heavenly kingdom, not in this land of the dying. Our life in this exile is primarily one of testing, of proving our mettle, and this arduous tempering of our souls in the fire calls for perseverance. Quote, "But when shall this be? It is arduous for a mortal, it is slow to a lover, but listen to the voice that deceives not, of him that says, Wait on the Lord. Endure the burning of the reins manfully, and the burning of the heart stoutly. Think not that what you do not as yet receive is denied you, that you faint not in despair. See how it is said, Wait on the Lord." St. Augustine, Expositions on the Psalms, 26, Exposition 1, 14. For St. Augustine, the reins are the lower appetites of man, and the heart is the will of man. The burning of the reins is the mortification of the desires of the flesh that the psalmist willingly undertakes, so as to receive the reward that is promised him from God. He similarly immolates his own heart and will so as to bring it into subjection and alignment with God's will. In this manner, he becomes tempered in the fire of persecution, and instead of falling away like the dross, he has his own dross purged and burned away, those sinful inclinations that weaken his will and dissolve the strength of his resolve. And since this testing and tempering leads him to the tabernacle of the Lord so as to possess the one thing that he so ardently desires, he concludes this psalm with an exhortation to himself and to all that desire righteousness and to see the face of God. Quote, he concludes by an apostrophe to himself to have patience and confidence in God, saying, My soul, as you desire to dwell in the house of God, as you have so many pledges of his love, as you believe to see the good things of the Lord in the land of the living, do not be disheartened in your trouble, do not look for any earthly consolation, but wait patiently, take courage in the Lord, act the part of a man, until the evil days shall have passed away, and the good ones shall have arrived. St. Robert Bellarmine, A Commentary on the Book of the Psalms, 26:14. He begins with the exhortation to expect the Lord, expecta Dominum, which has the sense not merely of waiting for something, but rather anticipating or looking forward to it. We might say that to expect is not simply to wait, but to await. The psalmist expects God to show up, as it were, to bring the promised desire that the Lord has placed within the heart of the psalmist. It is thus specifically within the fires of temptation and trial that one must expect the Lord. This is naturally precisely when the flesh and the desires therein want to eject from all trouble and have the most difficulty believing in God's promises. For the reins of the flesh are hard to keep a grip on when they cry out either in desire or in reeling from pain or other discomfort. But just as the metal in the fire has its impurities removed through prolonged exposure to intense heat and becomes tempered through subsequent testing in the fire, So the righteous man has both his lower appetites and his will brought into right order and submission to God's will. In fact, just as the sword cannot be forged without fire, so the soul cannot be brought into sanctification without suffering, and thus the psalmist understands that his trials are part and parcel of his expectation of the Lord. Quote, "Son, when thou comest to the service of God, stand in justice and in fear, and prepare thy soul for temptation. Humble thy heart and endure, incline thy ear, and receive the words of understanding, and make not haste in the time of clouds. Wait on God with patience, join thyself to God, and endure, that thy life may be increased in the latter end. Take all that shall be brought upon thee, and in thy sorrow endure, and in thy humiliation keep patience. For gold and silver are tried in the fire, but acceptable men in the furnace of humiliation." Sirach chapter 2, verses 1-5, Douay Rheims. In being forged through persecution and suffering, he now exhorts his soul to do manfully, viriliter age. This translates the Greek andrizou, to act like a man. The Latin vir means both man and courage, and words like virtue, from virtus, in the sense of valor or courageousness, come from this as well. To be a man is thus to be characterized by holding up under pressure, of enduring trouble for the sake of a higher end. To do manfully is not bravado or machismo, but is to do difficult things in difficult situations, to face them with courage and not give way. This applies to both the external assaults that befall us in this mortal life, but also the perhaps more vexing battle within. To do manfully is to defeat the tyranny of the desires of the flesh, to subdue one's appetites, and to master oneself, rather than being mastered by oneself. The subjugation of one's own will to something higher and more noble, ultimately to the will of God, is the mark of doing manfully. And a man who seeks after his own desires or to fulfill his own lusts is not acting manfully, despite what the current zeitgeist might suggest. The courageous heart, Evagrius of Pontus says, is that which is free from impure thoughts and false doctrines, which corresponds to St. Paul's exhortation to be renewed in mind by offering oneself as a living sacrifice unto God, so as to know his will. Within the fires of immolation are burned away both the desires of the flesh and the ignorance and false understandings that we bring to bear upon our thoughts of God, for in submission to him and his church we are brought to correct doctrine so as to have a pure heart and pure mind. And since this involves moral courage in facing down the internal struggle against temptation and sin, it applies to both sexes, albeit often in different ways. For women, just as men, are called to do manfully and to let thy heart take courage. Quote, "We must believe that the word manfully is attributed not only to men but also to women. When men grow soft, they have a womanly spirit, and women become manful when they continue with strength of mind in a good course of action." Cassiodorus' Explanation of the Psalms 26:14. The expecting of the Lord forms the ground of this valor, for bearing up under suffering is not for the sake of the suffering itself or of some misguided desire to bring oneself to martyrdom. Instead, it arises from the desire for that one thing, to be brought into the house of the Lord as the psalmist describes. And these testings and trials are the necessary fires to forge and temper the soul in holiness and sanctification. Quote, "In your zeal for good works and your contempt of human praise, be careful lest you wish to assign the good that you do, not to the grace of God, but to your own strength. Hold firmly that there can be no ability in you for good will or good works unless you received it by the free gift of divine mercy. Know, therefore, that it is God working in you both to will and to do, for a good will. Accordingly, work out your salvation in fear and trembling. Humble yourself in the sight of God that he may exalt you. Ask from him the beginning of a good will. Ask from him the effects of good works. Seek from him the gift of perseverance. Do not think at any time that you can either will or do anything good once his assistance has ceased. Ask him to turn away your eyes lest they see vanity. Ask him to show you the way in which you should walk. Petition him to direct your steps according to his word, and let no wickedness rule over you. Pray to him that he direct the works of your hands for you. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord." St. Fulgentius, Letter 2, 36, Ancient Christian Commentary on Scripture. In the final clause, both the Septuagint and the Old Latin repeat the same expression used in the beginning, hupomenon and expecta. Expecta, as noted earlier, has the sense of anticipating or awaiting, whereas hupomenon has more of the sense of enduring or standing firm. Both involve an expectation. For expecta, it is the quality of what is awaited itself that is more in view, whereas for hupomenon, it is perhaps more the experience itself of awaiting, although the anticipated object gives the impetus for bearing up or enduring. In the Vulgate, the final expression is sustine rather than expecta, with sustine tracking more closely to the sense of hupomenon. In this manner, the Vulgate captures both the quality of the object awaited in the opening clause and the experience of awaiting and enduring. It is perhaps that the opening clause gives the impetus for expecting, whereas the final clause an exhortation to bear up in this expectation while we await the Lord. In this vale of tears where we see only through a glass darkly, both senses will characterize this expectation of our hope, and thus we must both do manfully, which is our part to be courageous, as well as let thy heart take courage, to allow the Holy Ghost to strengthen our resolve, to assist us in bearing up under the trials and temptations which inevitably come our way, and which are ultimately meant to test our mettle, to forge us into what God desires us to be, to purge away the dross of sin and concupiscence, so that we can come to have purity of heart, without which one cannot see God. Quote, "For he hath heard our groans, he hath seen our deep sighs, he hath beheld our longing and our one petition. The one request through Christ our advocate hath he gladly received, and until we accomplish this pilgrimage, during which he will defer, not take away what he hath promised, he hath said unto us, Wait on the Lord. Thou wilt not wait on a false one, not on one that can be deceived, not on one that will not find what to give. The Almighty hath promised, the sure one hath promised, the true hath promised. Wait on the Lord, quit thyself like a man. Wait on the Lord, quit thyself like a man. Let thy heart be strong. Yea, wait on the Lord. By waiting on the Lord thou shalt possess him. Thou shalt possess him on whom thou shalt wait. Long for somewhat else, if thou canst find aught greater, better, sweeter." St. Augustine, Expositions on the Psalms 26, Exposition 2:23. Expect the Lord, do manfully, and let thy heart take courage, and wait thou for the Lord. Psalm 26, verse 14, Douay Reins.